Sanjay Radhamal. Jai Radha Madhava Jai Kunja Bihari Jai Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Yashodanandana Praja Janarana Yashodanandana Praja Janarana Jamunatira Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Jaya Hari Bol, Jai Gaur Hari Bol.
Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Gaur Nityananda ki jai, Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai, Gaur Pramanand.
Would you like to sing a little more, Maharaj? I expected more devotees to be here by now.
Bye.
I expected more devotees to be here by now, but looks like
whatever you consider.
What, Madhavi?
I was so excited for this lecture. I was excited that I got to come. It's like I'm missing the best ones.
Yeah.
I missed a bunch. So.
Okay, well, we can begin.
yeah.
So we can what? Sorry.
We can begin. Or-
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Maharaj's katas have been very sweet so far. And today he's going to be covering the topics related to his book. Not directly, or not indirectly, also I can't say exactly how, but the book is for the book, so you can read the book and the information is there. But Maharaj discussed with me that he wants to discuss the kind of etiquette and culture of how, as devotees, we come to information in the first place, and the kind of hierarchy that we give to what matters where and most, and how to find the kind of essential teachings of our teachings, and how those are established, the kind of, you could say, epistemology, maybe even some hermeneutics in there, around that culture as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So that's, I think, going to be the focus of Maharaj's discussion, and then naturally segueing into the book itself and some of the topics related to the book. So we've been diving deep in Gaura Leela, and we're also going to be having our parikrama this weekend. So looking forward to all of that. But as Madhavi said, I've kind of myself been looking forward to this portion. So excited here this evening, and I'll be listening from YouTube upstairs.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
If the YouTube link, could you post that in the chat as well? So,
Devotees know.
okay.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakya Chakshurim Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Shreshtam Manumapi Satriputram Atraswarupam Rupam Tasya Grajamuru Purim Matharim Vastavatiim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratitha Gripaya Shri Gurum Tannatusmi Vancha Kalpataru Vyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Nikhila Shruti Mauli Ratnamala Dyuti Nirajita Padapankajanta Aji Mukta Kulairupasyamanam Paritastam Harinam Samshrayami Anarpitacharim Chirat Karunayavatirna Kalo Shramarpaitamunnatojvalarasam Svabhakti Shrim Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hridaye Kandhare Spurato Vasati Nandana Ajanulambita Bhujjo Kanakavadato Sankirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Jugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataru Ladini Shakti Sarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastute He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijapadabja Dashanmayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Vihinaya Aparadha Lakshaya Kshiptashtagamaditarangamathi Kripamai Tvam Sharanam Prapalam Vrinde Namaste Charanarabindam Vrinde Namaste Charanarabindam. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nityananda ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Priman, Hari Hari Bol. So, pranam to all, good evening, and thanks so much for your presence here, those connected online as well. And as Dev Madhav Prabhu mentioned in the introduction, today he selected this day for me speaking a little bit about giving some introduction to one book I've recently published. I have it here because I'll share something about that from that. So this inherent or inherited Bhakti in the Jiva according to Gaudiya Vedanta, where I mostly dealt with the topic of whether Bhakti is part of the Atma's inherent constitution or it is something that is being received, given as a gift, received by grace, divine grace. So, and how to accommodate, how to understand, how to deal with apparent differences of opinion in our particular lineage. So what I'm trying to present in this book is, of course, my view on the topic, but trying, of course, not to make it just what I think independently, but trying to share what Shastra is saying in that regard, and trying to present the quotes from our main scriptures, hopefully in a sensitive way, in proper context, and from there trying to make a case for whatever conclusion I'm sharing there, basically. So for those who may already be a little bit familiar with the content of my book, whether by reading it or hearing some of the previous lectures I gave, and especially for those who don't, the book begins with a brief, and this is what Dev Madhav Prabhu mentioned, and I will try to focus today a little bit more on that, this notion of epistemic hierarchy, which basically means if we are about to speak about any topic in our particular Gaudiya Sampradaya, how to reach a particular conclusion in a particular topic, particular siddhanta or perfected conclusion, there is, if you will, a hierarchy to consider regarding which will be our main praman or our main source of evidence. So it's important that first of all we establish that clearly so we can engage in some fruitful dialogue and not just like saying, well, I think this, or I hear that, I read that, but just trying to have a particular order in which to give a specific weight to our Gaudiya revelation. And of course, for us Gaudiyas, and that's the point I'm trying to make in the first chapter of the book, our topmost praman or our topmost source of scriptural evidence is Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Jiva Goswami wrote a whole book making that point called Tattva Sandarbha. Interestingly, it's a whole book showing how Srimad Bhagavatam for us Gaudiyas is what we may call Pramana Shiromani, or the crest jewel of all scriptural evidence. And by extension, we also consider the books, the immediate books of the Goswamis, as a natural extension of what is in the Bhagavatam. Because if you study the books of the Goswamis, Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, Sandarbhas, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and his commentaries on the Bhagavatam, you will realize all their books revolve around the Bhagavatam. Actually, all their books are a detailed explanation of what is in the Bhagavatam. One thing is to go to the Bhagavatam by ourselves, another thing is to explore the Bhagavatam taking the hands of the Goswamis. I can assure you that you will find much more that what you can discover independently, if you will. So in that connection, establishing that both Srimad Bhagavatam and Goswami Grantha, the books of the Goswamis, constitute our main scriptural source of evidence, I try to present how they, in a very clear and consensual way, show that bhakti is not inherent in the constitution of the jiva, but actually is a gift that we receive, and we as Tatastha Shakti have the potential for that. I won't make a detailed case today about all that I wrote in hundreds of pages there in that regard, but in very brief words, bhakti is described in Shastra as the essence of the Swarup Shakti. And Swarup Shakti is described as one of three main Shaktis of Bhagavan: Maya Shakti, Tatastha Shakti, and Swarup Shakti. And clearly in Shastra is mentioned that Swarup Shakti is not present in the constitution of the jiva. So if bhakti is the essence of Swarup Shakti, and Swarup Shakti is not in the jiva, then bhakti is not in the jiva. But we have the potential to embrace, to integrate Swarup Shakti into our lives to the point of almost, if you will, becoming almost one with bhakti, in the form that an iron bar can be put into fire and acquire all the qualities of fire. So we have that potential, if you want to put it in that word, or as today I quoted something from Srila Siddhar Maharaj, he will speak in terms of adaptability. So Tatastha, the very term Tatastha, what we are, has to do with adaptability. And the best form of adaptability will be exercised in relation to Swarup Shakti. So basically that's the general premise of the first part of the book, in which I try to show what Shastra says about this particular topic. But of course, the question may come, well, but I've heard here and there that some other acharyas, maybe more contemporary ones, may have said something different, apparently different at least. So that's why I wrote the second part of my book, because the book has two parts. The first one shows what Shastra says, and the second part tries to harmonize or explain or understand why at times some of our contemporary acharyas may have said something to the contrary. I could have stopped my book on the first part and saved myself from lots of controversy. But to be honest, I felt, I'm almost sure that every single person who will write the book will then say, but what about this and this and this that I read, that I heard? So, okay, let's do a second part. And let's have a little bit of a few headaches here and there. No problem. So today I'd like to concentrate a little bit on this section. We have what Shastra is saying, but also we may hear something different from some sadhus or from maybe Sri Guru, whatever the case. So my point is, we have this, how do you say in English, like triad. Like Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. I imagine all of you have heard this expression, Guru, Shastra, Sadhu, Guru, Shastra, Sadhu. So how to reconcile if one of the three seems to say something different from the other? Is there any like prominence that is to be given to one above the other, or how to put all this in context? And so today I'd like to concentrate my presentation on this topic, on Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, and which is paramount of these three, if there is any, and how and where and so on. So today, actually, this topic came some time ago, speaking with different devotees. One of them was Jai Jagannath Prabhu, who spoke quite a while on this topic, as you can imagine. So we were thinking about this point, no? Like the crux of this whole epistemological issue, at least for some, is how a practitioner is to understand and view this triad of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. If you would like to represent this triad in a triangle, if you want to put it like that, so which one of the three is at the zenith of the triangle, in which other two occupy the two, how to say, vertices? Vertices, below, as representative of the one on top, no? If you want to put it in geometrical terms for a moment. So the answer to that, of course, is not that simple and that like simplistic, if you will. It's nuanced as life is. So we could say that in one sense, Guru is more important, the most important of all. In one sense, we could say Guru is more important than Shastra. In which sense? In the sense that the Guru, he, she, just in case, personifies, if it's he, she's bona fide, personifies the living essence in the teaching and in the application of what we find in Shastra. So I hope you follow my point. Okay, the Guru is more important than Shastra because he's like the active principle of divinity, and Shastra may be considered passive in that regard, in one sense. But all the importance that Guru will have in our lives will be derived of what Shastra is saying. Because if you go to the definition of Guru, you will always hear a Guru is someone who teaches Shastra and behaves according to Shastra. So the way in which the Guru is more important than Shastra depends on how much the Guru resorts to Shastra in both teaching and behavior. So the Guru's importance is derived from Shastra. So even if you want to make the case that in one sense, okay, Gurudev is more important than Shastra, if you take Shastra out of the equation, which is the relevance of Sri Guru in that case? Because again, Sabdi Paricha Nishnatam, Bhagavatam is saying, who is the Guru? Someone who is an expert in Shastra, in teaching it and in inhabiting the concepts, in living them. So maybe you're starting to see in which direction I'm going, but we see again the point. Guru has to behave and to speak according to Shastra. We never hear, we sometimes hear, okay, that person didn't speak about Shastra on the basis of Shastra, but we never will hear Shastra is not speaking according to Guru, no? Because it's the other way around how it works. It's not that Shastra has to adjust and based on what the sadhu says, but someone will be sadhu or guru deriving his or her standing on how much, on which degree that person is aligning himself, herself with the revealed sound. So again, in those cases that the Guru is more important than Shastra, if you take Shastra out of the equation, Guru stops being more important than Shastra. Because actually, in the way he's more important than Shastra, nonetheless has to do with Shastra. So even in that way that the Guru is more important, we could say Shastra is in the background, sustaining that. So in that sense, Shastra is more important, if you put it like that. We could say the Guru is more important than Shastra in the sense that the Guru personifies. Sri Guru is the personification of a type of love, of a type of bhakti, which comes as a result of a type of practice which is delineated in Shastra. Because we may say, okay, Gurudev is very important because he embodies love for God, but that love comes out of a practice, and that practice is revealed in Shastra and is executed on the basis of Shastra. So however we may like to put it, generally it all boils down to Shastra as the foundation. If we take that, we have no foundation, basically. So I will argue, and again, as you will see, it's not just my own opinion, that Shastra is the most important of all, especially when it comes to what we are speaking today, which is establishing some doctrinal matters, some Siddhantic topics, conclusions in our school. So regarding ascertaining the ultimate conclusions in our Sampradaya, the Guru is a representative of what has originally been established in Shastra. I'd like to share with you one quote from Srila Prabhupada. This comes from his purport to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 20, verse 352. Again for Ananda Murari, 220, 352. You'd let me know if this is clear or not. He says like this. He's speaking about Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu here. One should accept a thing as genuine by studying the words of saintly people, the spiritual master, and the Shastra, Guru, Shastra, Sadhu. The actual center is the Shastra, the revealed scripture. If a spiritual master does not speak according to the revealed scripture, he is not to be accepted. Similarly, if a saintly person does not speak according to Shastra, he is not a saintly person. The Shastra is the center for all. Unfortunately, at the present moment, people do not refer to the Shastras. That's how Prabhupada concludes that section. So I think it's pretty clear. He's invoking this principle of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, and he's mentioning if a Guru does not refer to Shastra, basically, it's not Guru. If a Sadhu does not refer to, he's not saying if a Shastra does not refer to Sadhu or to Guru, but the referring has to be in that connection. And he will say between these three, between this triangle, if you wanted to put it like that, he says Shastra is the center for all. So since we had invoked this idea of Shastra, also I'd like to share a few words concerning the idea of Shastriya Shraddha that you may have heard, that is spoken of by our Goswamis. Shastriya Shraddha means basically, Shraddha means faith, in simple words, and Shastriya means in connection to Shraddha. So Shastriya Shraddha means faith, that is faith in Shastra, basically. For us in Bhakti, it is mentioned that the adhikar to begin Bhakti, to engage in Bhakti, is Shraddha. Now, if you have Shraddha, welcome to the club, if you will. You can practice Bhakti. And our Shraddha, ideally, is Shastriya Shraddha. In other words, faith in the import of what Shastra is saying. Because we have faith in something, in someone. So in Bhakti, faith is in revelation, in what's coming from Shastra. In contrast to this type of Shraddha, called Shastriya Shraddha, our Goswamis speak about Lokiki Shraddha. Lokiki Shraddha, which means basically a type of faith that has been acquired merely by, how do you put it in English, like social convention. That's called Loka Parampara. No? Social convention. Maybe, I don't know. My ancestors were worshipping whatever deity, Deva, and I continue doing the worship because it was coming from my family ancestors, but I don't have very clear understanding why this is to be done and what's the purpose and who is that person in the altar or whatever. But my father did, my grandfather did, so I continue out of, again, social convention. That happens a lot. But that's not Shastriya Shraddha, no? Lokiki Shraddha, which is a way, again, of saying faith which is not based on Shastra, basically. It's not a faith that is developed through ascertaining the import of the scriptures. That's Shastriya Shraddha. So interestingly, this is one of the symptoms of a Kanishta Adhikari, the Shastra says. Kanishta Adhikari is not someone who has deeply rooted Shastriya Shraddha, but her faith will be more out of social convention or out of some form of, if you will, on some level at least, sentimentalism or something. Not condemning that person. Someone is Kanishta Adhikari, is glorious, is already on the path of bhakti, but that faith has to be, if you will, nourished and polished and educated in regarding to revelation. So Srila Jiva Goswami is basically saying that the faith of a Kanishta Adhikari is not the outcome of assimilating Shastra. When you understand the meaning of scripture, your faith will be Shastriya Shraddha. Will depend on what this revelation is saying. So basically for us as Gaudiyas, ideally faith means faith in what Shastra is saying, in the meanings of the words of the scriptures. So that's an important point. Interestingly, I received some comments, not that many, but some, from a few people who were considering that some sections of my book were disturbing the faith of others. So, of course, I spoke with them and other devotees, and of course, to begin with, that's not my intention, and that has not been my experience while writing the book to begin with, and that has not been the experience of many others who read the book. But of course, we can never satisfy everyone on the same level, basically. But the point was, I say, well, look, what I'm trying to do in my book is not so much to say what I think, but to share what Shastra is saying on this topic. So if by my quoting Shastra, your faith is disturbed, what type of faith do you have? Because ideally, your faith is to be nourished by Shastra. But if I quote Shastra and you are disturbed, then maybe the problem is not with my quoting Shastra, but with your faith that does not want to hear Shastra or something. It's disturbed by Shastra. You follow my point? So we are to develop Shastriya Shraddha. Ideally, we should be able to hear Shastra, to understand Shastra, and to nourish our faith through Shastra, not to be disturbed by it. Again, not condemning anyone, but just analyzing how sometimes these dynamics may play out. So at this point, of course, we are speaking about Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. And someone may say, well, if Shastra is more important, well, but everything that my Guru says is Shastra. I've heard that sometimes. Everything, Guru is a Sadhu, and what he says is Shastra. But my point is, so why this separate category that we hear over and over again? Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. Oh, Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu is repeatedly over and over. It means there is a difference between those three. Because if the three are the same, why explain them separately over and over again? So for us, Shastra is not whatever every Sadhu or Guru is saying. Whatever a Sadhu says, that falls in the category of Sadhu. Whatever Sri Guru is saying falls in the category of Guru, which ideally is something said on the basis of Shastra. But the point is, there's something separate called Shastra, which is not necessarily anything that had been said by some people. So again, for us Gaudiya Vaishnavas, Shastra means, as we mentioned today, Srimad Bhagavatam and the books of the Goswamis to begin with. That's the foundational scriptural basis of our Gaudiya Sampradaya, as we know. And that's why I began my book speaking about this idea of epistemic hierarchy, because if we don't have clear what's Shastra for us, then the conversation on these and other topics may go nowhere. Because someone may say, well, but that Sadhu says something, this thing once on a morning walk 300 years ago, and this other, my Guru say this, and I can say, my Guru say this, and we can be forever just saying, my Guru say this, and you say, my Guru say this, and my Guru, my Guru, my Guru. So we need to go to some place where the two of us find full consensus. So that's to go to those Shastras that are unanimously accepted in all the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Like I was speaking with one devotee about this topic, and the devotee was saying, okay, Bhaktivinoda Thakur say this, okay, and I'm trying to address it in my book, but I said, if you are speaking with some Gaudiya who doesn't come from the lineage of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you cannot say, my Bhaktivinoda Thakur say this, because for them, Bhaktivinoda Thakur doesn't hold the same weight than for us. And there's place for that also. So if I speak with people from other sampradayas. So then we have to go to those, again, common consensual scriptures that all Gaudiyas accept as foundational. And again, the books of the Goswamis hold equal weight, I would say, than the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in one sense even more, in the sense that they're expanding the meaning of the Bhagavatam. The Goswamis were especially, as you know, especially empowered. The Goswamis were especially empowered by Mahaprabhu, were especially instructed to write what we call the Bhakti Shastras. They are called our Shastra Gurus in our Sampradaya, because they have this specific function that Mahaprabhu gave to them right at the beginning of the Sampradaya, to be the architects of the Sampradaya. My Guru Maharaj likes to give this example. Mahaprabhu was like a very powerful, ecstatic, as it has been described, like a golden volcano of divine love. So it's a little bit intimidating to approach a volcano, especially if it's erupting. It's like, okay, we can take a picture some kilometers from distance, but not get closer. Sometimes he's compared like to a waterfall. Similarly intimidating, get closer to a waterfall. So my Guru Maharaj will say, okay, Mahaprabhu was like a waterfall, and the Goswamis took that waterfall of his ecstasy, and they make a lake with the writing. So we can approach to that lake, peaceful lake, and bathe, immerse there, because the waterfall may be too intimidating. So that lake are the books of the Goswamis, which speak all what was Mahaprabhu about in his inner self. So the Goswamis books are considered Shastra. They are not considered something written by a sadhu. Of course, the Goswamis are sadhus, but in our Gaudiya epistemology, this has been established by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Raghavarma Chandrika and other places. Goswamis are our Shastra gurus. And especially, I will say, in this connection of the books of the Goswamis, the Sat Sandarbhas of Srila Jiva Goswami hold a very interesting position, because Srila Jiva Goswami has been empowered by Mahaprabhu to be the Tattvacharya of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Different Goswamis represent different functions. As you know, Rupa Goswami was empowered to write about Avideya or Rasa, so he's called Rasacharya, Avideya-charya. Govinda Dev, the deity he installed, represents Avideya. Sanatan Goswami, empowered to establish Sambandha Gyan. Vaishnava etiquette, also Maryad. Then Raghunadas Goswami, empowered to establish Prayojan. He's uniquely absorbed in the principle of Radha Dasyam, which is the highest reach of our Sampradaya. Gopal Bhatta Goswami, he was empowered to be the Diksha Guru among the Goswamis, interestingly. Mahaprabhu gave to him his asana, his kopin, which symbolizes you are the Acharya. And interestingly, the consideration for Gopal Bhatta being the Acharya, of course, he was totally qualified, but also he had a very prestigious birth. He was born in South India. He was a Brahmin. He was the son of the head priest of the Rangaji temple. So it's a relative consideration, but which held some weight in the climate at the times at that moment. And what about Raghunath Bhatta Goswami? He was very especially famous for cooking. So that's also important. How much someone has to cook. Archan, and also he will chant the Bhagavatam very sweetly in 4 different melodies. So do not downplay cooking, please. And say, Raghunath Bhatta was just the cook. I mean, if you don't have cook, we don't have our kitchen religion here. And Jiva Goswami, the youngest of the Goswamis, he was considered Tattvacharya. In the words of Srila Prabhupada, the greatest philosopher of all time. So that's not small. How to say? Yeah, basically. Yeah, accomplishment. Yeah, the greatest philosopher of all time. So we should have a look at what Jiva Goswami is saying, just in case. If we really want to follow Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada say he's the greatest philosopher of all time, I will say, okay, I think I have to go through some of what he wrote. So he clearly, in Jiva Goswami, he clearly mentioned this idea of bhakti not being inherent in the jiva, especially in his Sandarbhas, and most especially in his Bhakti Sandarbha. And in his Bhakti Sandarbha, for example, in connection to our topic of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, he very interestingly establishes also the ultimacy of Shastra by quoting one verse from Kurma Purana in Anucheda 265 that says, to contradict the authorized conclusions of Scripture is atheism, and to do so is millions of times worse than hostility towards one's Guru. Of course, with this he's not saying, you can offend Gurudev, it's not that problematic. He's not making that point. The point is, again, the ultimacy of Shastra and how Sri Guru, to be who he is relying on Shastra. Sorry again? That's a verse from Kurma Puran, which is quoted by Jiva Goswami in Bhakti Sandarbha 265, just in case. Kurma Purana 2:16-18. So, of course, the idea here is criticism of Shastra is considered more grievous than criticism of one's Guru, because, as we said, the Guru derives his or her authority from the authority of Shastra. It is Shastra that defines the qualities of a Guru, basically. If you don't have Shastra, you don't have a clue what to expect from a Guru. Who is Guru, who is not Guru? I mean, all that is being said in Shastra. Let me share with you some of the main verses from Shastra about Sri Guru. There are three main verses, I would say. I mean, there are so many, but three main, which are actually very similar to each other and appear in three different scriptures, in Mundaka Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. So maybe all of you mostly will know the one to begin with, at least from Bhagavad Gita, 4:34. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprasnena sivaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanina sattva darsinaha. So this verse basically is, all these verses, as we will see, will speak about the qualities of the Guru, also the qualities of the disciple, which is a very important point also. It's not just, okay, where is the Guru, how is the Guru, but also where I am, where is the disciple, where I am as a disciple. Because I've heard sometimes people asking me, telling me, Maharaj, I've looked for Guru, but I'm not finding my Guru. Where is my Guru? Where is my Guru? But the point is, are you there as a disciple? Because if you are not ready to do your part, your Guru may be here, but you are not finding, because you are not where you have to be as a disciple. It's a 50-50% equation. It's not that a Gurudev will do everything and I just do not have to be preoccupied about being a servant, the disciple. No, there is some homework to do. So this verse is saying, Tat vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. To begin with, mention these 3 points that we have to approach the Guru with. Surrender to the Guru, pranipat, which interestingly Srila Prabhupada translates as approach the Guru. That's a very interesting idea, because actually pranipat means surrender to the Guru. But Prabhupada says approach the Guru. Like in plain, approach the Guru means surrender to the Guru. It's not approach like physically and take a selfie. I'm approaching, I'm close to him. That doesn't happen. Real proximity to the Guru is in terms of anugatya, or inner following, if you will, surrender. Srila Siddhar Maharaj once he said, in the body of the Guru there may be different germs and other entities which are very intimately associated with him, but actually are taking energy from the body. So you can be very close to the Guru in a spirit of exploitation. So real proximity is surrender, pranipat. Pariprashna, inquire in a humble way, and sevaya, render, offer some favorable service. Upadekshanti te jnanam, jnanina tattva darshinaha. Then comes the symptoms of the Guru. Jnani and tattva darshin. These 2 important points. Jnani means he has knowledge, and the knowledge is of Shastra. And tattva darshan means he is a seer of truth. So he doesn't only have the theoretical information, but he's also experiencing transformation. One thing is information, another thing is transformation. So the Guru has both, a theoretical knowledge of Shastra, and he's walking the talk. He has inner insight. That's one verse. The second verse, which is similar from the Bhagavatam, says, Tasmat Gurum Prapadita Ipnyasu Sriya Uttamam Shabde Parichanishnatam Brahmani Upasramashrayam. Basically saying the same, saying, if you want, you have to approach a Guru and surrender to him. Tasmat Gurum Prapadita Jignashu Shreya Uttaman. If you are inquiring about the highest good, you have to take shelter in a Guru. And then it says, Shabde Pare Chanishnata. The Guru is, Nishnata means like drenched. Drenched, you say? Drenched. He's drenched. He has knowledge of Shastra. He's drenched in Shabda. He's drenched in revealed sound. He has pare. He has realization of Shastra. Sometimes Shastra Brahman is called in the Bhagavatam Shabda Brahman, and you have then Para Brahman. So Shabda Brahman is the absolute in the form of sound, referring to Shastra. And by going to that one, then you attain Para Brahman, personal absolute. So Sabde Pare Chanishnatam Brahmani Upasramashrayam. He has controlled all of his senses. He has taken shelter in Upasama, in tranquility. So again, this other verse is saying the Guru has knowledge of Shastra and has realization of Shastra, similar to the Bhagavad Gita. And there is one more verse, which is from the Mundaka Upanishad, which says, Tat Vijnanartam Shagurumi Bhavigachet Samit Panishrotriyam Brahmanishtam. Again, similar idea, interestingly. Tat Vijnanartam. If you are looking for the highest type of knowledge, sagurum evavi gachet. You must approach a guru. Not like an artificial imposition, but if, like my Guru likes to say, you must approach a guru. Like if you have to do that, you must approach. If you want that, you have to do that. There's no way out. And then it says, samit panishrotriyam brahmanishtam. So one has to approach with a disposition of sacrifice, and the guru is shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Again, shrotriyam is expert in shruti, expert in the sound, revealed sound, expert in shastra. Brahmanishtam means he's firmly situated in Brahman. Brahman in this case means not impersonal Brahman, but the absolute. So he has firm realization of the absolute based on shastra. So again, these three verses, which are the most important ones about which are the attributes we are to expect in the guru, all the three mentioned, guru is expert in shastra, guru has realization on the basis of shastra. So that on one side, and I'd like to share a few words from my book, if it's no problem. I'd like to read a few pages with your permission, in this connection, of course, to conclude my presentation. And of course, if there are questions or anything, we can continue speaking. So I'll read a few pages. It says like this. It's a subtitle in the book that's called The Ultimacy of Shastra and the Sadhu's Role in It. Pages 243 onwards. As has been explained above, the utterances of Guru and Sadhu must be backed up of or reconciled with Gaudiya Siddhanta, with Shastra. If they are not reconcilable, then a secondary explanation for their statements must be sought. Otherwise, those statements cannot be accepted as Siddhanta. In other words, we cannot allow spontaneous new ideas to appear in our Siddhanta on the plea of their being the Guru's utterance and therefore absolute, without seeking solid Shastric support for such conclusions. As Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada nicely establishes in his purport to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse 15, he says, the process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he's saying. End of the quote. In this connection, Narottam Das Thakur says in his Prema Bhakti Chandrika, verse 12, Sadhu Shastra Guru Bhakya Hridaye Karya Aikya. A similar line is somewhere else also. Or, this means, in my heart, I will see the words of the saints, the scriptures, and the Guru as one and the same. The implied suggestion here is that there can be more than one or several apparently opposing perspectives and insights that we receive from these three foundational sources, and that considerable effort is required. Here the word Korea means having made, presenting effort. So considerable effort is required to then digest those statements in such a way that a singularity, or the word Aikya means singularity, is reached or emerges in the heart, Hridaya. Ultimately, that singularity consists on what Shastra has originally revealed. Hence, it is highly inconsistent to accept something from anyone as the Siddhanta of our line if it has no support from the Shastra. We call this fundamentalism. The proper way to verify a philosophical conclusion is to determine its conformity to Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. And since without Shastra we cannot even know the proper definition of the other two, of the three, Shastra is thus supreme. Sri Krishna confirms this important point in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, verse 23. Ja Shastra vidimutriya vartate kama karataha nasasiddhim avapnatim na sukham na parangatim. Basically, he's saying that for someone who rejects Shastra and acts whimsically, that person do not attain perfection, highest goal, nor happiness. So you may ask, what do you attain if that's the case? A big headache, maybe. So in this connection, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.1.25 says that one of the 64 qualities of Sri Krishna is that he himself is Shastra Chakshushu. He sees through the eyes of scripture. Also, while elaborating on Bhagavad Gita 17.1 and 17.13, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments in his conclusion to Raghavarma Chandrika 2.8, he says, these three groups of persons are reprehensible, one of them being those who perform sacrifices in disregard of the injunctions of the scriptures. Before they disregard the scriptures, such persons have repeatedly experienced, are experiencing, and in the future will experience many disturbances. It is pointless to discuss this any further, he says. This foundational notion is further supported by a famous statement from the Brahma Yamala, abundantly quoted by both Vishwanath and Sri Rupa, as well as all of our main Gaudiya acharyas. And the verse says, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidimbina Akaitiki Harer Bhaktir Utpatayaiva Kalpate, which basically means that bhakti which is executed without considering the statements of Shastra, it's an unnecessary disturbance to society. So another point that makes, if you take out Shastra, disturbance is there, even in the name of bhakti. One last paragraph. We could say that Shastra is so powerful that it even rules over God. For example, although Buddha is an incarnation of Bhagavan, luminaries such as Srila Jiva Goswami have declared that his teachings are rejected by Gaudiyas because they are not supported by Shastra. Even his God. Of course, while Shastra is the last word, we must not forget that it is understood through the medium of Guru and Sadhu. Thus, the process is not as simple as it appears, for without taking instruction in a bona fide parampara, one will be lost in the jungle of sounds, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj says sometimes, coming from the scripture. Shastra itself confirms this fact over and over again. Like Tako Pratishtastra Tayovi, many verses. Still, even if we go along with the argument that the Guru's word is final no matter what the Shastra says, then we must accept that the Guru has also his Guru, who also had a Guru. In this way, going back up to the chain of succession, ultimately one will reach Krishna, the original Guru, from whom Shastra comes and who himself sticks to Shastra, as we mentioned. So we are back where we started, with the Shastra as the ultimate pramana. Therefore, one has to follow Krishna, which means following his words, which are nothing but Shastra. So, so some words in this connection, and of course, if sometimes, and that's what I try to deal with in my book, in some cases it seems that something that Sri Guru mentions or some sadhu mentions seems to contradict Shastra, we cannot just modify Shastra to adjust to whatever that sadhu is saying. But we should examine in detail what the Guru has said, to whom, in which circumstance, what he said before, what he said after, and see that probably there are most exceptional cases, and this hopefully not the norm. And that's what I've tried to do in the second part of the book, trying to analyze those particular cases, where, why, how, and present some possibilities as to how to harmonize those statements. For more on that, you have to read the book. You know, that will be too much to speak that now. But in conclusion, before going, if you have any questions, what we can say is that while certainty, Guru and Sadhu hold very primary importance for us in many ways and in many instances, Shastra is of paramount importance in ascertaining doctrinal matters, Siddhantic issues, what is what's the conclusion on this topic. And also Shastra is fundamental for building the type of faith that we want to develop, Shastriya Shraddha, faith in revelation. Because that faith is the one that will take us to engage in bhakti, to engage in sadhana in a particular way and towards our ultimate goal in our Gaudiya Sampradaya. So anyhow, some thoughts I want to share. This is just one of the topics of the book, although the book mainly officially speaks about whether bhakti is inherent or not, actually speaks about many other topics in the context of that topic. And this is one of them. So I, by the inspiration of some devotees and suggestion, I've chosen to focus in this particular direction today. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments or doubts or something you may like to share. Hands raising. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I will have time for all, so no problem.
I'm wondering, one of the things, I've just started your book. I've made through the first chapter, so I'm still kind of in the beginning. And I had the question of, I have a few questions, but I had the question of, isn't the Goswami Grantha just sadhu? Of,
Mhm.
Of that equation. You spoke to that. You spoke that, it's been established in our sampradaya that at least even in general Gaudiyas,
Mhm.
followers of Mahaprabhu,
Mhm.
that they've been empowered to establish Shastra.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, is there other, and probably throughout your book there's other ones, but if there's other pramanam, because from what some of the examples that I've heard are mainly from Jiva Goswami kind of clarifying in his Tattva Sandarbha, but I'm wondering, are there other examples in Shastra that make this statement about the inherence or the non-inherence of bhakti in the Jiva?
If there are examples in books other than the Goswamis
Yeah,
books,
like, or I guess, where does the bulk of that pramanam come from? Say if someone is having trouble accepting that Goswami Grantha is also Shastra,
Mhm.
if it's not just sadhu,
Mhm.
and then why are the Goswami saying this doesn't line up with Shastra?
Okay. Well, as I try to make the case on some level, and yes, in the book is further developed, for us the books of the Goswamis are Shastra, because for us to begin with, Goswamis are Nitya Siddha Parikars, who are eternal associates of Bhagavan, and who, if you want to call, okay, for us Shastra is only the Bhagavatam. I mean, not only, but the main Shastric reference for us Gaudis is the Bhagavatam. I have no problem with that. But if you study the books of the Goswamis, it's actually explanations on the Bhagavatam. So it's not they are writing books separate from the Bhagavad. So in that way, I'm trying to make this point. Their books are basically an extension of the Bhagavatam. It's not that their own books on their own topics without considering our main Shastra Praman. So one can make that case. Again, one can make the case that I made, that Mahaprabhu commanded them to write these specific books as the architects of the Sampradaya. That's really unanimously accepted by all Gaudiyas. So that's my point. As Gaudiyas, we have that type of input regarding, okay, these are the books of the Goswamis. Now, they hold a special position. But let's say that even someone may say, okay, I don't care for the Goswami. Hopefully nobody says that, but let's be hypothetical for a minute. I only want to go to the Bhagavatam. Okay, let's go to the Bhagavatam, only the Bhagavatam. You go to the 11th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam is saying, Satsanga Labdhaya Bhaktya, for example, which means Bhakti is attained by Sadhu Sangha. Satsanga Labdhaya means to attain. That word labdhaya is even in the Bhagavad Gita. Brahma bhuta prashanatmana sochatina kankshati sarva sarvesu bhutesu mad bhaktim labati param. Labate means to attain. Mad bhaktim, Krishna says, attains my bhakti. So how you can attain something, that you have.
What you're made of.
Mm-hmm. So Bhagavatam is making the same point. Satsanga labdhaya bhaktya. Bhakti is attained by sadhu sangha. Whereas we were discussing, I think yesterday in Golok Premdam, Muktim dadati karhichits mana bhakti yogam. Another line in the Bhagavatam. Krishna gives mukti relatively easy, but he does not give bhakti that easily. So again, I mean, someone is giving you that means you don't have. Or then in my first chapter, I quote, maybe the second chapter, sorry, I quoted the Bhagavatam which says, Bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya, another famous line, which means bhakti comes from bhakti, which is another way of saying bhakti comes from bhakta, from the sadhu sangha, from he who has bhakti. So I'm just sharing a few quotes. I share much more from the Bhagavatam if we want to make the case, okay, let's dismiss the Goswamis as Shastra, and if only Bhagavatam is Shastra, okay, let's go with the Bhagavatam, no problem. There are many verses which clearly mention this idea. One receives, attains, and so on, gives, Krishna gives. But again, I will make the case that we have to understand that the Goswamis are paramount. The Goswamis books are of paramount importance for us. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur at the end of Raghuvarma Chandrika makes this point. No, like the books of the Goswamis are on an equal level with the Bhagavatam for us Gaudiyas. So some thoughts in that connection. And of course, there are other books that I'm referring to in my book. For example, there's one famous verse from Vishnu Purana, which is quoted twice by Jiva Goswami, once in Bhagavad Sandarbha, once in Krishna Sandarbha, and it says Ladini Shakti Sandini Sambit Twayi Eka. It's basically Dhruva Maharaj is praying there to Krishna, and he's saying, Ladini, Sandini, and Sambit exist only in you. Which Ladini, Sambini, and Sambit are the three ingredients of Swarup Shakti, of which Bhakti is its essence. So he says, only in you, Bhagavan, there is Sandini, Sambit, and Ladini. And Sridhar Swami, famous Bhagavad commentator, he also wrote a commentary on Vishnu Purana. So in his commentary to that verse, he's saying, Swarup Shakti is only in Bhagavan, not in the Jivas. So, I mean, if you want something clearer than that, it's okay.
So in that sense,
Mhm.
I mean, I think this was coming up for me the other day as I was kind of thinking about the conversation, and seeing when devotees are kind of disturbed by this conversation, like you're mentioning, like I'm speaking something from Shastra, and then if you're being disturbed, then what kind of faith? But I'm wondering if some of that disturbance may be from this sense that, as if we're having the conversation, isn't it that we can kind of understand or kind of, I guess, take for granted that bhakti has been given to us if we're even interested in this conversation? Or at what level of Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya is bhakti actually given? Does that make sense?
I'm not so sure if I got the gist of it.
I guess in gist, if one's having this conversation about inherence, there's some indication then that they've had Sadhu Sangha.
Yeah.
So is it then to be assumed that most people having the conversation, you can almost assume that there's bhakti's been, they've already been kind of given bhakti.
Yeah.
And they're kind of in that process of nourishing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then kind of like a follow-up to that is like, when is bhakti given then? Is it given in Shraddha? Or is it given in Sadhu Sangha or Bhajana Kriya? Or is it not stereotyped?
I mean, generally and I addressed that, I think, in the second chapter of my book, so it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to limit all my replies to read second chapter, read page 200, do your homework. But just in case you have some reference there, when Srila Rupa Goswami describes the 9 stages of bhakti from Shraddha to Prem, and he begins saying, Ado Shraddha. So Ado means in the beginning is Shraddha, and Baladev Vidyabhushan interprets that Ado in the beginning as a first Sadhu Sangha. Because we have Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Anartha Nivritti, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, Rucha, Sakti, Prem. But before Shraddha, there is an unofficial Sadhu Sangha, if you will, where you receive your first bhakti samskars, if you will, devotional impression, even without knowing that's going on. But that's going on, even if you don't have that knowledge. Jiva Goswami in the Bhakti Sandarbha gives the example of Narad Muni before becoming Narad Muni in the series of previous lifetime that he himself narrated in the Bhagavatam, when he was the son of the maid servant, and he was with his mother as a child. And this, in the words of Prabhupada, the Bhakti Vedantas came, these great personalities who stayed for Chaturmasya, and Narad was a child and was just like not aware of what was going on, but he was just there, hearing the sadhus, taking the remnants, not thinking, okay, this is sadhu sangha and this will take me to a progress or whatever. It's just he was there, and the sadhus came. So he was receiving his first sadhu sangha, if you want to put it like that. He was receiving bhakti, even without his acknowledgement of that. And of course, that eventually fructified, and we have Narad Muni, if you want to put it like that. So bhakti will come to us out of its own accord, Jadrichaya. That's also mentioned in the second chapter. Now, bhakti has its own independent will and comes to our lives even without us knowing about that. And eventually, by the grace of that sadhu sangha, we develop some faith in that, and we officially look for further sadhu sangha in an intentional way. In the beginning, we have no intention of looking for sadhu sangha because we don't have even a clue what sadhu sangha. So So we could say that will be the beginning of bhakti, which of course we cannot say if that began for us in this lifetime or a previous one. At that point, you cannot make the whole math, but it has a beginning at some point in that case, in our non-beginningless journey, Brahmanda Brahmitikon. Yes, it
I want to first say some appreciation. I'm still in the first half of the book, and I have a lot of appreciation just from the very beginning, because recognizing the effect that the inherent mentalities had on my own practice, and seeing that actually it's in different nuanced ways. When I experience bhakti in others, and I'm operating under the context that it's inherent, then their bhakti is like a threat, because it makes me question the inherence of my own bhakti.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the inheritance, actually, it's a great opportunity to relish bhakti sukriti and the bhakti shakti emanating from devotees.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just a very powerful, I felt immediately relieved reading every page. Because it like really honestly purified me of the subtle, like trying to dig for something inside myself that isn't actually there.
Mm-hmm.
And one question, which of course now, like I've heard from that we understand that actually praying, that bhakti isn't inherent in tatashta shakti. So it's only but nonetheless, one doubt was in my mind, and whether I'll frame it like why these statements are there, or why this sort of context is often given in the statements of purification. For instance, bhakti is not inherent; it's inherited. So my question is, why is there so much emphasis on purification if we're in the mood of inheriting bhakti shakti, which seems more of like a pavriti thing, but there's a lot of emphasis on anartana vritti, and even Mahaprabhu's Shikshasamam begins with Cheto Darpana Marjanam, and it makes me wonder, why does it not start with some analogy of like sticking iron in a fire? Why is that not the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it Cheto Darpana Marjanam? Because that very much feeds the conception of, oh, I'm uncovering, but instead I'm just uncovering a clean thing that may not have bhakti. Like, what is it that I'm uncovering? And why so much emphasis on purification?
Okay, thank you. Good question. So, thanks for your appreciation as well. Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I agree that in some places you will find lots of emphasis on purification, but that's not necessarily the case in every, how to say, sangha or place. I mean, it's not. Of course, in Shastra there are some statements like the one you mentioned, and we will speak about that. But it's not that necessarily every single sangha or practitioner or individual will like address their practice with that degree of you have to purify. And of course, I understand that maybe if you think already the thing is there and you have just to uncover, then you have to purify. You have to take all the dirt because, which of course that may be problematic, as we know, because if I have prem here, how prem can be covered to begin with? I mean, how prem can be covered by Maya? As I was speaking the other day with someone, and I asked someone, I won't mention names, but do you think prem is inherent? And the person said yes. So we already have prem, we already have rasa, we have already a relationship with Krishna. Yes. So where's that? I mean, why am I here? Well, because of Maya. But so you think that prem can be covered by Maya? And the reply was yes. And I was like, again, prem can be covered by Maya? Yes. So, okay. I mean, if prem can be covered by Maya, why I'm doing what I'm doing? to attain prem and maybe be covered by Maya after attaining prem or something. I mean, I'm struggling in sadhana to attain a goal that eventually can be covered by Maya, even if you have prem. So if you have prem and be covered by Maya means, I don't know, Subal, Madhumangal, Jashoda can be covered by Maya at some point.
Mm.
And we're going to practice Raganuga Bhakti, because Raganuga Bhakti means to follow someone who can be covered by Maya. What if I'm trying to follow Rupa Manjari and Rupa Manjari falls in Maya? And I have no more referent role to follow, because that one who had prem became covered by Maya. So that's a dangerous proposition, basically. So the point is, we sometimes may mention these ideas, but we have to play out the implications of that. Now, if I say prem can be covered by Maya, which is the full implication of that? Everyone who has prem can be covered by Maya. Krishna can be covered by Maya. Radha can be covered by Maya. Gaur Nityananda can be covered by Maya. I mean, prem is the way to transcend Maya. Not Maya will be covered in prem. That makes no sense. No. You follow my... I mean, I'm trying to be as commonsensical as I'm not wanting to torture with quotes. I could do that, but prem attracts Krishna. Sri Krishna Akarshini. So if prem attracts Krishna, I mean, prem helps us to transcend Maya, but that's a secondary thing. Mainly, it attracts the all attractive. What to speak of dismissing Maya? So how can you say that Maya can cover prem? That makes no sense. And of course, that's tied with the idea, if Maya can cover prem, then you can fall from Golok Vrindavan, which again is not our Siddhanta. Nobody can fall from Vaikuntha. That creates some other problems, but that's another conversation. So regarding your question, again, I will say you will find in different sanghas or practitioners different emphasis, and probably the background for that emphasis or not emphasis is maybe a different opinion in this connection. Because of course I get your point. If we know, okay, prem is not inherent and bhakti is received all as a gift, nonetheless, I mean, we can speak about purifying ourselves so we can better receive that gift. No? Sri Gaur Govinda Maharaj will give this analogy of, you have received the full thing, but he gave, again, an analogy, like your heart is like a container. So bhakti is being poured on that container, but the container has holes. No? So the container is filled. I say, wow, it's filled, but after a few minutes, it's like, whoa, what's going on? So I need to cover, if you will, those holes. And in that way, we speak about purifying ourselves. No? And also Mahaprabhu mentions Chetudarpana Marjanam, because in that verse, which is the first verse of Shikshastakam, he's enumerating seven effects of Sankirtan. So the first one is, he's not saying so much, he's not like emphasizing this has to happen. He's mostly saying what will happen as a result of engaging in Sankirtan. So in order, first thing, Chetudarpana Marjanam, which interestingly, Chetudarpana Marjanam means, as you know, Marjanam means to clean, Darpana means mirror, and Chitta comes from Chitta, which technically speaking could be referred to in today's psychological language as the subconscious. So Mahaprabhu is saying, first effect of Srinam is it will clean the subconscious. It will clean the dust. We know there's lots of stuff in the subconscious, that we were speaking the other day, a little bit joking with the devotees, I think, Golok Premadam, that I compared the subconscious with the, how do you call that? That place in your house where you put all like the stuff. There was some other name. I don't know. There's some room outside the house that you put.
Shed.
Shed. That was the word. Shed. Yeah, shed. That was the word. So that's the shed, no? Where you don't know where to put some stuff in your house, put that in the shed. But at some point you have put so much stuff there, there's no more place for that, and you close the shed and you no longer know what's going on inside there. No? And after a few days, you start to hear voices coming from the shed. No? It's taking its own life of its own. And you get closer and you see some arm coming. It's what's going on there. I don't want to enter in the shed. So that's kind of the analogy for the subconscious. No? Some things that we don't want to confront. So we have even that mechanism. Throw it to the shed. Throw it to the shed. No, throw it to the shed. Yeah. Okay. Everything's nice. Paka, but the shed is not paka. So the point is, the first effect of Srinam will be like a broom will start to move that dust, and of course it may be perceived even as, oh, this is a problem. What's going on? And this thing that I would see is coming to the foreground, and I don't want. But you are invited to take responsibility for that. No? That. So again, it's not necessarily that with that Mahaprabhu is making like an exaggerated emphasis on you have to purify yourself, but basically he's saying this is the first thing that will happen when you start to chant. But your main focus is chant and try to chant properly and good association. But this will be the byproducts of that along the way in different stages. But yeah, I agree that our main emphasis should be in trying to practice, as we spoke a little bit yesterday, in a positive way, not so much like in a negative way, like trying to get rid of, not conceiving the practice as getting rid of, because that's more like in a negative orientation to the practice. And anartha nibriti actually is not a practice in it unto itself. I mean, you don't practice anartha nibriti. You engage in bhajan kriya. Anartha nibriti is the result of that at one stage. It's not I will do anartha nibriti. What does it mean? If you say I will chant, that's bhajan kriya. That's not anartha nibriti. Anartha nibriti is the result of bhajan kriya. So the focus is bhajana kriya. Anartha nibriti comes out of its own accord. And we have to have that faith that by embracing the practice properly, these byproducts will come naturally. I don't have even to be extremely concerned. I mean, I will say, I like to say that for us, anartha nibriti will mean that while we are engaging in bhajana kriya, we have the sincerity to acknowledge, as much as I can see, which things do I have to transcend, which are the things that I have to work on at this stage. Because we have to do some work of integrity and recognition, okay, which state I am, which is the present day anartha, if you will, the main thing I have to work on. To acknowledge that, to have the courage of acknowledging and not just like nothing is going on, and maybe you want to experience ecstatic symptoms, but it's not the moment yet for that. I've seen sometimes the devotees getting discouraged because with good intention, but they are practicing, but they're idealizing this and this should be happening in my practice. But they are idealizing certain things that correspond with the stage of ruchi, for example. And they don't realize I'm still before, I haven't reached nishta yet. So I'm expecting something that will come 3 stages after, so I get discouraged because that's not coming. But something is coming, which is corresponding to the stage I am. So it's important to know where we are in the map, in the journey. That's why, for me, books like Madhura Kadambini are very interesting, because it's a very clear depiction of where you are. And you read the whole thing. If you have a little bit of sincerity, you will be able to recognize, okay, that's me. I'm there. I'm there, but I want to be, I should be here. Long-term goal, middle-term goal, long-term goal. It's important to establish these goals also in our lives, not only where we are, but where do we want to be. Short-term, middle-term, long-term, prem bhakti. But maybe it's too much if we just try to, okay, I have to reach prem bhakti, first I have to reach nishta. I think that's more relatable to where we are. If we are not yet there yet, then middle term, long term, that's more sustainable. So, yes.
I have a question. First, I don't really want to, because it's like your topic was really specific, and I really appreciated how it set such a good foundation. I'm sure your book, I only looked through it, I haven't actually read it, but it set such a strong foundation. And it was funny because when you were speaking, actually, when you said which one is on the top, I did think, I was like, where is on the top? And it makes so much sense that even you're sort of presenting it as like, the supports almost, like the the goal is to shop Krishna, what Krishna speaks, and then these are kind of your balancing supports to help you. So I really appreciated that. But I just wanted to hear from you in person because this I thought was such a fascinating thing. I was ignorant, and I just saw this drawing the line from bhakti to rasa, and because I have heard, I've heard the follow the jiva argument and so on, and actually that was like very disturbing for me at the very beginning of my book.
Oh, yeah.
So it actually led me to the Gaudiya Math away from this kind because I was so frustrated about it. But what's so interesting is that even within that sangha, or certain aspects of that sangha, they still have this point that but rasa is somehow inherent. And I wanted to hear more from you about that drawing the line, how bhakti to rasa to Swarup, like if you would speak some about it.
Yeah, I think that's. Of course, it's in the book. Also, I'll say some words. I just want to confirm which number of chapter. Chapter 5, I think. Chapter 5, yeah, is rasa predetermined. So there is a whole chapter on rasa. Then the next chapter is about siddha deha. I try to. It's the same thing, but I try to approach it from different sides. So bhakti, prem, rasa, siddha deha.
But how is it that someone would make, that you would, because it does seem like intellectually that like, if you don't have bhakti,
Yes.
how would you have rasa?
You don't have rasa. That's my reply to that. And I understand that someone may be saying that. Again, I'm aware that some people will say, again, bhakti is inherent, prem is inherent, rasa is inherent, siddha deha is inherent. Because generally, the ones who say bhakti is inherent will say everything else is inherent, generally. Again, there are different opinions. It's not even one and the second. There are many in between. But the idea is, of course, that if bhakti is not inherent, rasa is not inherent, because rasa is bhakti rasa. Rasa is the ultimate expression of bhakti, if you want to put it like that.
Bhakti grows into rasa.
Exactly. Technically speaking, the goal of our life is not even prem, but it's bhakti rasa, which is a combination. I don't want to become too technical and keep torturing you. I'm already torturing considerably. But if you study Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami, he very elaborately describes Bhakti Rasa, Sthayi Bhav, Vibhav, Anubhav, Sattvika Bhav, Vyabhichari Bhav, all these ecstatic elements put together, combined in a particular way, will give the experience of rasa. And to begin with, it's Sthayi Bhav. So Sthayi Bhav means like a fixed emotion for Krishna. Fixed not in the sense that it's already fixed, but eventually it becomes your defining bhav towards Krishna. And that, combined with these other elements, gives us a result experience of Bhakti Rasa. So my point is that Bhakti Rasa is the ultimate blossoming of Bhakti. Now, if you want to speak in terms of, as Mahaprabhu did, of the seed and the vine, and he starts saying what Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. When he gives the analogy of the Bhakti Lata Beach, the wine, you say wine of love of Bhakti. The first thing he's saying, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. Now that seed of the vine of Bhakti is given by the Guru to the disciple. So that seed, eventually he gives all this analogy, starts to grow, and eventually it fully blossoms at the end in the form of Bhakti Rasa.
Just to clarify,
Yes.
that
Yes.
Then they say, like, there's this book, Narada's Disciples Gopal, and of like his quotations on the subject of, because then they say, no, the Jiva didn't follow, but then they say that, but actually the spirit is inherent, and that's it's there in seed form. But it sounds like, would you say that the seed of bhakti is given, and within that seed, the rasa is also, like, because a particular bhakta will give a particular, they have their own flavor, and so then picking up what you're given. I mean, in terms of developing one's own taste, because if it's not inherent, then it's coming from an external, it's coming from someone.
Mhm.
So would you say, like, it's not, because they say that seed is what the jiva is, but you're saying that bhakti and that type of bhakti, that
I mean,
flavor of bhakti.
I'm not saying I'm quoting Krishna Kaviraj Goswami that the
Sure.
seed is being given. Of course, it's an analogy, and I know that they make the analogy that we have the seed and the sadhu sangha is like the water. But again, these are analogies, so we can present all analogies that we want. That's not the way to establish Siddhanta. Siddhanta is not established through analogies, or not even through my guru said, as I tried to make the point in the very beginning, because if not, I mean, you will tell me my guru said, and I will tell you my guru said, and we are not really having a dialogue. And interestingly, I'm friends with many disciples of Srila Narayan Maharaj, and not all of his followers have the same opinion on this topic, interestingly. And I have many of them who fully agree with the points in my book. And I even compare, and I presented in my book, for example, some statements by Srila Narayan Maharaj, which, let me share you a few, which, at least for me, doesn't seem to be like bhakti is inherent. So, for example, let me see where it is. He said, bhakti is also not the bliss inherent in the living entity's constitutional nature, since that bliss is extremely minute, and consequently, Bhagavan cannot become overpowered by it. Also, he says, Bhava is an eternally accomplished phenomenon. It always exists in the Nitya Parikars, or eternal associates of Bhagavan. This Nitya Siddha Bhava manifests itself from the Lord's eternal associates into the heart of the purified jiva. Or, I don't know, he said, Vasudev Krishna had appeared in the heart of Vasudev, and Vasudev had impregnated Devaki by mantra. This is called Sambandha Gyan. The Guru gives his disciple a relationship with Krishna by mantra. One more. Last one. Rati is Visuddha Sattva. It does not come from the heart of the sadhaka. It has to come down from the heart of a Ragatmika Bhakta. Rati is not in our hands. It is in the hands of devotees who are certainly Krishna Bhaktas, and only they can give it.
I have so many questions. I can save them maybe. I don't know if I'll be able to be here to ask. Can I ask one more?
Yes, why not?
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. Somehow this came up recently, not so long ago, discussing with Padmanabha and also with developing about this topic and some time ago, but there's questions, people often quote this thing from Jaiva Dharma, where the guru appears in different ways to different disciples. So that if it's from that guru, say, who's giving the bhakti and the bhakti rasa, the flavor, and how is it that one guru would have two different disciples with two different tastes?
Well, of course, there are many ways to explain that, but one of them is, of course, if we agree that bhakti is not inherent, that's received, if you will, the particular devotional affinity I have will be received by those sadhus that mostly influence my life. Then we will think, okay, so if one guru has one particular affinity, all his disciples will have that affinity that their guru has, and that will be generally the rule. Now that say there can be exceptions to the rule, and in that case, how to explain them? Well, very easily that devotee may have had bhakti samskar from previous lifetimes, which are strong enough as to be different from that of his present guru. There's place. Again, there are exceptions to the rule, but you have Shyamananda being attracted towards Madhurya Bhav, while his guru Hidaya Chaitanya was in Sakhya Bhav, or I don't know. Well, not everyone may agree with this, but according to my perspective and that of my Guru Maharaj and Srila Siddhar Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada has affinity towards Sakhya Bhav, and his Gurudev has affinity toward Madhurya Bhav. So there you have a case. Again, there may be exceptions to the rule, but I mean, there's possible, and in that way you can explain that in connection to whether you like to think, okay, there are Nitya-Siddhas and coming already with that mood, like, I don't know, Mahaprabhu trying to convert Murari Gupta. And of course he couldn't, because Murari Gupta is Hanuman. So how you will convert Hanuman? How you will convince Hanuman, stop serving Ram? I mean, that's not a good project.
But you're saying it's simply on the basis of samskar for samskar, not any, because he's eternally, it's a hard analogy.
Yeah, in the case of Hanuman, that's an exception because he's a Nitya Siddha. So it's a different category of jivas, basically. But in the case of Tatastha Jiva, we can speak about, that person received bhakti samskar from previous lifetimes. I mean, Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, if you want to taste bhakti rasa, minimum you require one more previous life of having acquired enough bhakti samskars. So in the next one, you taste bhakti rasa. So he's making these points of previous lifetimes of impressions. So
When I feel like the dynamics to a rasa, where, for instance, like in the case of Srila Prabhupada being attracted to Sakya rasa, I've heard also just, more specifically like this Priyanarma Saka, right, where there is some Madhurya in there. So he's having this, samskars from his guru, who's also in Madhurya Bhav, right? And so all of those things are mixing in, and rasa's dynamic, at least, from what I've understood from hearing. So it's not going to be like, oh, I'm in this camp, so therefore that's the influence. It's
exactly.
in a crooked way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In that particular case, we could see it like that. Prabhupada had those Sakya scars, and the influence and association of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta gave the Madhurya ingredient to the equation. So you mix Sakya with Madhurya, and you have Priyanarma Sakya, which is those type of friends of Krishna who are assisting him in his romantic exploits, if you will. Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. So that's possible for sure. And Srila Prabhupada said that his Siksha Guru was Srila Siddha Maharaj, who also had affinity towards Madhurya Bhav. So, but again, there's not a conflict. Again, it's not like Kurus versus Pandavas or something like this. Especially Sakya Madhurya Rasa, Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, these two rasas are friendly with each other. Some other rasas are considered enemies. Not enemies because they are fighting in the lila, but they're not compatible regarding, I don't know, for example, Vatsalya and Madhurya, they are not compatible. One practical example is at night when Krishna is supposed to go to sleep. Yashoda wants, may my Lal has the sound sleep whole night. She wants Krishna to sleep. But the gopis have another plan in mind. No? See you in the organized spot for Rasa Lila this night. So one group wants something, the other group wants something different. May you sleep, may you remain awake the whole night with us. Of course, one is not knowing what is going on in the other place, not in the case of Yashoda, but the point is there is no conflict, but they have different ideas about that. But regarding Sakya Bhav, Krishna's friends will totally agree with, not all of Krishna's friends know about that section, but those who know are totally actually facilitating somehow or other that to happen. So he had the question and he left, I think, or he's returning. I don't remember his name.
Everyone else
Okay. If he returns, we will give him priority. He's returning. You had the question.
Oh, yeah, sure. You touched on it a little bit, in the sense. There's the different categories of jivas, like some are Nitya-Siddhas, and then there's, and I forgot the term, but most of the jivas. So is it inherent or inherent in the Nitya-Siddhas in the sense, you know what I mean? Because they're not able to lose it, so does that?
Yeah.
And then while the rest of the jivas,
Yeah, I mentioned in my book that, for example, I present the idea that we are Tatastha Jivas, we are Tatastha Shakti, but we could speak that there are some Jivas. Actually, the term Jiva is not technically correct in related to eternal associates, because Jivas in Shastra are defined by Atmas who are affected by Maya Shakti. So regarding eternal associate, Nitya Parishads, we could make the case that there are Nitya Parishads who are not Tatastha, but who are made of Swarup Shakti in itself. They are made of Swarup Shakti. They're like, for example, Radha is, of course, Swarup Shakti personified, and the gopis are considered her Kaha Vyuha, like personal expansions of Radha. So if Radha is a personification of Swarup Shakti, those gopis are also personification of Swarup Shakti. They're not Tatastha. They don't belong to that category of Shakti, Tatastha Shakti, but Swarup Shakti. Or when Rupa Goswami defines Raganuga Bhakti, now what does it mean to practice Raganuga Bhakti? To follow Ragatmikas. The Ragatmikas was the idea of Ragatmika. Then those whose Atma is made of Raga. So that means those whose very self is made of love for Krishna. So that, again, we can make the case they are made of Swarup Shakti, not of Tatastha Shakti. So in that, but also, to further complicate more the thing, Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami, the Sandarbhas, also make the point, most of the Nityas, he says, there can be Nitya Siddhas who are Tatastha Shakti also. Like he gives the example of Garuda. Interesting. So you can be a Nitya Siddha, and probably the rule will be most of them will be made of Swarup Shakti. But there can be some made of Tatastha Shakti, but who are Nitya Siddha, who have been forever there. No? I told you, I will complicate more the whole stuff.
Take it to the edge till our intellect gives up.
Okay, that's a good symptom.
It collapses.
Here is the hand a little bit. Let's take some turns.
Well, my question isn't really, it's sort of, I apologize for sort of breaking the flow, but just a quick question, maybe somebody else too over Prashad after this could help answer this too, if it's more appropriate. But my question, Swami, was just pertaining to the different levels of, say a devotee goes through different levels of devotion, or sort of different stages of, I guess, what they achieve or experience through devotion. I'm just wondering if there's a certain text or something. I know recently you told me to read the Nectar of the
Devotion.
of instruction, and maybe it's in there, but if there's a certain text where I could learn more about the succession, the different stages that I would go through, so I can understand better where I'm at and sort of where I'm heading.
Yeah, I see. Well, I would recommend the one that I mentioned, which is the Madhurya Kadambini, which is a very, of course, in itself is a short text, and generally there are commentaries written to it, which really help to clarify. But this text is like because these main 9 stages we speak about generally are coming in 2 verses written by Rupa Goswami, but he does not elaborate on those verses. He just mentioned the stages and continues speaking other topics. But this Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he takes those 2 verses and make a whole book out of them, basically, and tries to unpack from the very beginning. I mean, the very beginning of Madhurya Kadambini is basically how bhakti comes to us. And he makes this point, bhakti comes from bhakti. And then he starts to analyze Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana, Kriya, Nartana, everything till Prem. So that's a very good one. Of course, Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, although it's not speaking in terms of these 9 stages, somehow is also giving some like sequence, beginning from control the impulse of speech and reside eternally in Radhakonda in 11 verses. Don't speak gossip and Lila Smarana or something. It's interesting also. So that's also that may be also even a good one to begin with before going to something like Madhurya Kadambini.
Okay.
Because it's also quite practical and giving very interesting advice regarding do's and don'ts, if you will, and how to relate, and very simple, basic things, which are, I mean, sometimes simple and basic are not that simple and basic. So we need to go back to those things many times. So I will encourage, and of course they have recommended that one to you first, so that's a good one. Maybe at some point Madhurya Kadambini can be an interesting one. You can ask the local assembly here, but I'm sure that may be
both those books.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it's important to know where we are, the symptoms of the journey, basically, because you may be feeling something and not knowing how to explain to yourself what's going on, why this is happening, why do I feel like this? It's okay to feel like this. This is wrong. I'm doing something wrong. And something in that book, just a brief mention that I always liked a lot by Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, is that when he describes anishtita bhajana kriya, which means unstable practice of bhakti, which basically is where 99% is in. I always joke with the devotees when I explain that stage, which has 6 symptoms, Mayi, Ganataral, and so on. And I start to tell them, okay, you raise your hand if you identify with each one of them. So I start, number 1, everyone, shh. Number 2, number 3, they start to take Chaturbhuj, 4 arms. So somehow they bring some extra arms and hands. So I say, well, it's good. I mean, we're getting somewhere. It's good to find, okay, I'm there. And the good point is, as embarrassing as that may be, that's part of the process. I mean, that's happening in the context of bhakti. So in one sense, it's glorious because it's bhakti is in my life. Although you hear the symptoms of these stages and it's like, oh my God, yeah, it's me. Oh yeah, also. But at the same time, that's in the context of bhakti. So that's glorious. So we are not to feel like extremely ashamed or enter into a guilt trip. But understand, actually, this has to happen. At some point, I had to go through that. Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur is including those stages as part of the journey. It's not that you can just jump the embarrassing chapter of Anisthita Bhajana Kriya and just land into ecstatic waters of bhava or something. No, you have to embrace those stages. And he's confirming it's okay to go through them. I mean, you have to. It's not the ultimate goal. The problem is when you say, okay, I stay here. Hopefully you want to stay there because it's pretty embarrassing, but but it's not wrong to go through there. I mean, actually, it's a symptom that something is going on. You are becoming awake and, okay, I'm realizing all that I have to deal with. So in one sense, it's glorious. In one sense, it's embarrassing. In another sense, it's glorious. Even though it sounds paradoxical. Yeah, so that's glorious. That's as we were speaking yesterday with the devotees. We, at the end of the day, for us sadhu sanghas, let's sit together and share how we failed today or how we could do better tomorrow. So that may be embarrassing. No? How I fail, quote unquote, fail again. Try to be careful of the terms. How can I do better tomorrow? And you will open your heart, express your vulnerability, as we said the other day. So much empowerment will come from that. So it's embarrassing, but it's empowering. So those two things do not kill each other, if you will. There's place for a combination of them too. So anyhow,
Thank you.
no, thank you. So something else? I mean, we are already 1 hour and a half, but we can go. Yeah. What's your name, sorry?
Sumakadasa.
Sumakada.
I wanted to thank you first of all for the class and for the book. As many years I've started it, but not had the chance to dive more deeply into it. But I was wondering if in your studies or your inquiries into the scriptures of the Goswamis, you encountered this type of question in relation to the concept of time, and by time I mean in the sense of eternal time, because sometimes I feel like the preoccupation with the when, like is it before, is it after, does it happen here, does it happen there, is very much related to our experience of time, which is linear or circulinear in a sense. So we're always thinking, is it here or is it here in our journey, so to speak. But when we read, for example, thinking the Brahma Samhita 556 is described how time, so not even half a moment is lost. So it's there is no past. Not half a moment is passes. So it's kind of I don't know how to put it. I don't know the Goswami scriptures enough to go into that. But it's like an eternal present, so to speak. So that preoccupation that we have here from this standpoint, from this world, of when, where does it happen? Is it before, after? We go up and down. Is related to our understanding. While from the perspective of the spiritual world, so to speak, is eternal presence. So it doesn't matter if one is a Nitya Siddha or is a Sadhana Siddha. And even the very question of is it before, is it after? Like, did one arrive now? Did they arrive later? Or was the body there? Was the body not there? And all these topics that seem to become very controversial here.
They are not controversial there, for sure.
Exactly. So I was wondering how if these questions are seen, like, are pivoted on the concept of eternal time, how things would play, or if the Goswamis discuss with this dimension as well.
Okay. You have 3 more hours? That's a long topic. I'll give some brief minutes with the blessings of the boss here. So, yeah, the topic of time is discussed in the Goswami's books, for sure. Jiva Goswami speaks about that in his Sandarbhas, in other places as well. And of course, as you mentioned, it's very different, the function of time as we know it here in our 3-dimensional plane, and time basically, as Krishna also in the Gita, devouring everything. Basically, that's the notion we have here of time, if you will. No? Like, you lost 1 second pass, you cannot recover that. No. Ajur Harati Vaipum Shamudhyana Stanchayana Satyasarthi Kshatshanam Sraktama Shloka Vartiya Bhagavatam say famous verse. Every rising and setting of the sun, your life is being stolen. That's a heavy language of the Bhagavatam. No? Every time the sun rises and goes, there's a message for you. 1 day less. Of course, the verse then says, except for those who glorify Bhagavan. For those, time is not passing. And the commentators give the extreme example of, you have the Kumars, 4 Kumars, who of course were Brahma Gyanis, but eventually became devotees, and they remain eternally as boys. They are not affected by time. Like implying, for those who remain deeply engrossed in Hari Kirtan, not affected by time. So here again, time is having a particular function. The word kala can mean time, and kala can mean death also, which is basically not far one from another. That's our side of experience, and past, present, future, and so on. Now in the spiritual world, and I know this may not be a topic easy to grasp, in the sense of, as much as we are still affected by time here, it will be difficult to conceive something apart from that. That's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur sometimes regarding these things will say, this will be solved finally in meditation. Like, in other words, like when your mind goes beyond duality and the gunas, you will fully having a direct experience of some of these concepts. So in the spiritual world, there is time, but there is not a time that is degenerating, you say? As long as it's passing, it's not that the inhabitants of Braj are becoming old, and so on. But there's day, there's night, and there's a passing of time in a cyclical way, which is facilitating the dynamics of the Leela. Because if there's no day and night, there's no Rasa Leela, there's no meeting at Radhakund in the midday, there's no this Astakaliya dynamic that happens, eightfold division of the day in out the Bingolo. So time is there facilitating the unfolding of the Leela, but it's not like contracting or devouring or nothing in that sense, but it's just time is a devotee, if you want to put it like that. Time is serving the Leela. When we speak about the sun and the moon in Golok Vrindavan, they are devotees. So they are appearing according to the necessity of the Leela and facilitating. So that's the function of time there. There's one interesting article by Sadhananda Swami about that comes to mind now. It may be of your interest. Maybe you can later remind me and I can send that to you or something. Sadhananda Das, Sadhananda Swami, he was German disciple of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, interestingly. He wrote many interesting things. So yeah, I agree with your point that from the perspective of eternity, they're inhabiting this eternal present, and there's not this like notion of, okay, this happened and that happened, if you will. Or as you mentioned, that was an interesting point when you mentioned Nitya Siddha, Sadhana Siddha, how you can establish the difference. Because sometimes from this side, I've heard about it's like, okay, I don't know, my guru is a Nitya Siddha. And if you suggest he's a Sadhana Siddha, I may jump on your neck or something. You know? You are being offensive. And like if Sadhana Siddha is something wrong or something. You know? And there's this very interesting quote. I shared that yesterday, that someone wanted to ask Srila Prabhupada this question. Someone asked Srila Prabhupada, who is higher, the Sadhana Siddha or the Nitya Siddha? Prabhupada replied very substantially, the important word there is Siddha. Period. And apart from that, how you will figure out which is Sadhana Siddha or Nitya Siddha? You don't have like a litmus test to, okay, he's Nitya Siddha, this not Sadhana Siddha, and it's not that one is better than the other even. Someone may say, no, it's better the one who was always liberated. Well,
It's always.
Sanatana Goswami says in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the Sadhana Siddha has a special glory because his bhakti was put to test. He went through many challenges that the Nitya Siddha never went through.
So sadhana's matter.
I mean, we don't want to create that dichotomy. No? It's just Gor Nityananda ki jai. But my point is there are ways to see both of them in that light. No? At the end of the day, we are not to fight about these type of things. No? And of course, it is also mentioned that the subjective experience, when someone reaches that realm, if you want to put it like that, it's like, I've always been here, basically, subjectively speaking. No? It's not that you will be in Golok Vrindavan and you are remembering your previous life and your conditioned experience, because there are no samskars. I mean, all the material samskar have to be, first of all, clean for you to enter there. So you won't have any memory of conditioned existence. You follow my point. So the subjective individual experience is, I've been here forever. Interestingly. Again, from our side, that's another thing. And that's why we are engaging in all these complicated stuff, conversations. But I can assure you that yes, the people in the Lila are not questioning if bhakti is inherent or not, or anything. No time for that, to be honest, as well. But there's place for speaking about that from this. I mean, at least for me, I've written a whole book. Somehow I have to justify that. But of course, there's place also to become distracted by speaking about those things if it's not with the proper intention and focus. And as I told Namrasa once, not necessarily everyone has to read such a book or speak about those topics. It's not for everyone. Some people may say, why that is important? Well, if you feel like that, probably we don't have to speak about that. And it's okay. I'm not just trying to impose the topic on every person I'm crossing, no? Because I know but I've seen that for many that was important to be spoken about and clarify certain things which may have some other further implications, as we were speaking today with the Madhava, some interesting ideas. Now, like somehow we may think, which will be the repercussion of whether bhakti is inherent or not, or whether we fall from Vaikuntha or not. What's the importance of that? How will that affect my practice? And if you play out the implications of how that will affect your practice, that may even be affecting how you're treating your wife at home. There are so many layers of implications and even cultural biases and things that intermingle with one another without our knowledge. But when you start like to unpack all those things, you realize, oh my gosh, no, the idea of fall from grace has repercussions even in my daily domestic experience with my kids. There's place for that. And then you start to realize, okay, it may be good to have the proper notion about that point, because that may affect all my proper notions till my most pragmatic daily experiences. So,
like I can't even read Shastra properly because I have a fundamental misconception of what I'm reading.
mm-hmm. And the problem, if you have a certain misconception, you find that Shastra is saying something which contradicts your misconception, but you are sure about your misconception, who knows what you will do with that section of Shastra to accommodate to your misconception, and you may start to make a whole Neo Sampradaya, basically. And that's what sometimes we call Apa Sampradaya. That something may be created out of something which is not the proper Siddhanta, basically. I mean, Apa Sampradaya comes from Apa Siddhanta, multiplied by trillions, if you will. And sometimes that takes to Aparat, no? Apa. So be careful with that. Should I offer the lamp to Maharaj or not? He's given the class now. What to do?
Yes, I'm like, I'm reading.
I'm reading.
My husband, give it to Maharaj.
Give him the.
I wanted,
Okay.
if I could,
Thank
Raj,
you.
I wanted to hear from you about Jiva Goswami's primacy. You did bring it up some, but that was one of the interesting elements in the last 2 years.
Jiva Goswami's
Jiva
Goswami's
Goswami's primacy within
primacy.
our kind of
Yeah.
epistemology.
Yeah.
We often hear that we're Rupa Ravana.
Mm.
And while there are some Prabhupada statement, as you brought out, that Jiva Goswami is the world's greatest philosopher, and he kind of synthesized the canon of the other Goswamis. Still, up until maybe the last 2 years, I hadn't really heard of his primacy and the Sandarbha's kind of central position as establishing our Siddhanta and the Bhagavatam. So, if you could say a little more about that.
Yeah. I agree with that point that Jiva Goswami's somehow role and position in our Sampradaya has been somehow, I don't want to say downplayed, but just maybe innocently ignored. Maybe because in part, at least for some part of the community, because for some time his texts were not that available in Western languages. So that plays a role, like it or not.
Yeah.
So the more they became available, the more the community starts to become aware, okay, this is a pretty comprehensive, systematic presentation of the whole Bhagavatam. This is monumental. And you start to pay more close attention. And for example, you find statements like, because I was speaking that day with Sandhavutta about Sandarbhas, I said, no, for us the most important book is Chaitanya Charitamrita and things. I say, I mean, do you know that Chaitanya Charitamrita is greatly based on the Sandarbhas? I mean, Chaitanya Charitamrita is based on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjwal Nilamani, and Sat Sandarbhas. And by the way, if you want, I can tell you what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has to say about the Sandarbhas in Chaitanya Charitamrita 3.4.229. He says, Bhagavat Sandarbha Nama Kaila Granta Sar Bhagavat Siddhante Tahan Payapar. The Bhagavat Sandarbha, which is another name for the Sat Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, is the essence of all scriptures. This word presents the limit of all Siddhanta concerning Bhagavan. That's Chaitanya Charitamrita. So you read Chaitanya Charitamrita again if you say only Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, I mean, the essence of all the scriptures and the limit of all Siddhanta. No? So that's something, I will say.
Yes.
So I'm just quoting something that shows the role of Jiva Goswami's presentation as the Tattvacharya. And when you study the Sandarbhas, of course, it's a dense work. It's not just something, okay, give me a weekend and I finish it. Yeah, exactly. It takes years. I'm studying it now for the last 3 years. And of course, I'm not thinking, okay, when I finish, I don't need to study it again or something. So that's a monumental thing. And his presentation is extremely thorough and systematic and comprehensive. And it's an explanation of the Bhagavatam, because every single point he's making throughout the whole book, in each one of the Anuchedas or chapters, all of them starts by referring to one verse of the Bhagavatam. And then he unfolds the particular point, always referring to the Bhagavatam. So that's basically a commentary on the Bhagavatam, presenting the main points of all our tradition, referring to the Bhagavatam, which is the center for us. And that's what he established in the first Sandarbha. That was Sandarbha, speaking about Bhagavatam and this very source of pramana for us, evidence. And then he goes Bhagavat Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, Krishna Sandarbha, Bhakti Sandarbha, Priti Sandarbha, establishing Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Braja Krishna, all that being Sambandha. The first Anucheda Sandarbhas is Sambandha Gyan. Then Bhakti Sandarbha, Abhideya. Then Priti Sandarbha, Prayojan. But that's very detailed, a degree of detail. And he presents arguments to his points. Just the arguments to his point are like totally flabbergasting. It's like, how can he think of such an argument? Even the Purva Paksha he's representing in the argument may never come to that level of argumentation. So he himself, for the sake of his presentation, is presenting the most highly possible refined arguments, and then he defeats them. So he's doing all that work for us, basically, if you will. Even if you have some doubts, he will present a deeper doubt. And he will solve that. Yeah, he will solve that for you. So it's like really given like in a very interesting way.
I know that we're gonna do more Q&A sessions.
Yeah, actually, this is not this is quasi Q&A after the end of the class, but we'll have two classes only of Q&A.
And I wonder maybe I just want to maybe like say it so that we can touch on it another time. But
let's say
this quote, that sometimes devotees will sample from Srila Prabhupada, and I'd like to know the context of when Prabhupada was saying this, but he's saying first deserve, then desire. So then practically, because I think that's one thing that's been very exciting about my kind of becoming privy to this topic and understanding what our acharyas are saying in terms of that bhakti is being gained and molded by our sangha, it's being gained and given by the bhaktas. So then, the application of, okay, what does it mean first deserve, then desire? And where does desire come into play in terms of this?
Can we leave it for the Q&A?
Yeah.
You will be able to come?
I'll be, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because so we can unfold a little bit more. Now we are almost 2 hours here, so. And you have one question also. What do you think we can leave for the next one, or it will be difficult for you to come?
She may pop in a minute.
Yeah.
I feel guilty asking this question.
No guilt trip, please.
Anyway, I'm so afraid of like killing my own self and making an offense.
No offense, no fear, no guilt trip. It's okay.
Because I was discussing with my husband at one point, he was saying in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's this verse that says, if one commits an offense, then one's, even if one has vav in a particular rasa, then that can be downgraded. So the implication is that there is an actual hierarchy of the rasas. So I guess the question is, it's hard for me to understand just with my intellect. It's like, okay, if I'm not anything yet, like I'm like a blank slate, right? Like in one sense, like I have some scars, but hypothetically, if I haven't become anything yet, I don't have a spirit yet, then I could become anything, right? Is that?
I wouldn't frame it like that. It's not that you are not anything, or that you don't have a swarup. There is a swarup and there's a bhakti swarup. The Atma has a swarup in itself. We are tatastha shakti, tatastha jiva. We are something, we are someone, and that there is a swarup. Muktir hitvanyatarupam swarupena vivyastuti, says the Bhagavatam. So even to be situated as Atmas, without even having a siddha deha, if you will. So for us, our bhakti swarup is the most possible highest reach we can have as Atmas. So bhakti is not inherent, but our brightest potential can be met with bhakti. But you can achieve some other level of attainment for eternity, which doesn't imply prem, as we were speaking yesterday. You can attain Vaikuntha without prem. Rupa Goswami mentions that in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. You can attain Shantarasa in Vaikuntha for eternity. Shantarasa does not imply prem. One of the main symptoms of prem is mamata, which is possessiveness. towards Krishna. The main symptom of Shanta Rasa is nirmamata, lack of possessiveness. Or you can attain Brahma Sayuja. You can go to Brahman for eternity. That doesn't require prem. So the point is, you can attain a position in eternity, and it doesn't mean that you have to have prem. So the fact that you can have prem and recite, that speaks about a special upgrading of our potential that happens only in connection with bhakti. Yeah. Read my book. That's the homework this time. As much as you will have time to that. I'm sure that you are pretty busy as well.
Does your book say what the essential ontology of the jiva is, like void of bhakti? Like,
I hope yes. So you read my book. I mean, you are reading it, but keep doing it. We continue these days for the Q&As, or if someone cannot have for Q&A or has some question, you can contact me personally. Somehow we can continue speaking, no problem. So thank you so much for your time, for your questions, for your presence, and tomorrow we have, for those who would like to come, the Tirubab Mahotsav in the morning of Vrindavan Das Thakur. So we will be meeting at 8 in the morning. Okay. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Sri Gaur Nityananda ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Bol, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Hari Bol.